Hi folks, I'm Miss Erin from C.C. Miller Memorial Library, here for today's middle grade moment, where we're going to discuss 3 books that are great for 9 to 12-year-old readers. The 3 books that I'm talking about today are all about robots. So let's get started. The first book that I want to tell you about is called Cog, and it's by Greg Van Eekhout. And Cog is the story of a robot named Cog, which stands for cognitive development. So Cog is a robot that is designed to learn, and to learn both as lessons are taught to him and on his own. He looks like a 12-year-old boy, but he's actually a 7-month-old robot. And he's being raised by Gina, a scientist who both designed him and is studying how he learns and is also teaching him herself. So they live in a house together, kind of looking like a normal family, where he has a bedroom where he stays and processes what he learned the night before. He's not technically sleeping. And he eats breakfast with Gina, and they go to the store together. They do all of these things. But one day, Cog makes a mistake. He knows that he learns by making mistakes, and so he decides he's going to go out and do something deliberately as a mistake. And instead of waking up back home with Gina, he wakes up in a lab of a company called Unimind. And it turns out that Gina has been working for Unimind, and they had sponsored the building of Cog, but they don't like what Gina is doing. And so they've pulled Cog away from Gina, and they won't tell him where she is. And Cog decides to go on a rescue mission and find her. And the more he finds out about Unimind, the company, the more he thinks he does not like the way that it works. So he runs off with 3 other robots. There's Ada, who's built as like a battle robot. She's really built for fighting. There's the dog robot, whose name is Proto. And then there is Car, that's a car. Oh, and I forgot the 4th robot. The 4th robot is Trashbot, who's used to just cleaning up the trash around the town. And so they go off on a wild adventure to rescue Gina and to try to take down Unimind, because they don't like what this company is doing. So if you like adventure novels, if you like the idea of watching robots learn and seeing different kinds of robots interact with each other, Cog is a great adventure story for that. So again, this is Cog by Greg Van Eekhout. All right, so that was definitely a story where we hear a lot of the book from the robot's point of view. The next book, we hear both from the robot's point of view and the human characters that are around the robot. So the next one is called Friendroid, and it's by M.M. Vaughan. And it's the story of Eric, or Slick, who is an android, a robot that's meant to look like a human. But when we start the story, Slick doesn't know that he's a robot. He thinks he's just a regular kid in middle school who's going to a new school and there to try to make friends. And he meets a kid named Danny, and Danny is not the most popular kid in the class. So he's not the kid that Slick is encouraged to make friends with. He's not the kid that Slick automatically thinks that he's going to be friends with, because Slick has been programmed to think and talk a lot about the brands of his clothes and how expensive the toys in his house are and the games that he plays with his friends. And the only thing that he really has in common with Danny is the game that they play. So they're both really into a video game and trying to figure out the puzzles in it and things like that. But other than that, he doesn't have a lot in common with Danny. Slick is actually making friends with a lot of the popular kids, where they're talking about clothes and comparing how much money their families have. And for Danny, that's all a little bit out of reach. His family doesn't have a lot of money. He does have a very supportive home, though. His mom is super involved, even though she works long hours as a nurse. She is really keeping an eye on things, and she notices a lot of weird things going on in Slick's house. He has two parents, but they don't seem to respond the way she would expect parents to when, say, Slick gets hurt, or when Slick is home by himself after school for hours and hours and hours and hours. Not just like a little bit, an hour or two until your parents get home, but your parents are out doing a million different things, and Slick is just home by himself all night. So Danny and his mom start getting really involved in Slick's life, and we find out at the beginning of the story, I don't want to ruin it for you, but we find out at the beginning of the story that something terrible has happened to Slick, and he's not around anymore. And so the rest of the book is kind of retelling what happened from Slick's point of view in his old journals, and from Danny's point of view, looking back on what happened. So if you like stories about friendship, but you want a little bit of a science fiction element from what if I was friends with a robot? Or what if my friends were not being nice to another friend that I had? This is a great look at friendships with just that little bit of a science fiction twist. So again, it's called Friendroid, and it's by M.M. Vaughan. All right, so the last book that I wanted to tell you about is a little less robots as characters and a little more about building your own robots and the kinds of robotics that you could do in the real world right now. So this is from the Nick and Tesla series, and it's called Robot Army Rampage. And it's by Science Bob Pflugfelder and Steve Hockensmith. So this is the story of Nick and Tesla, who are siblings, and they have been living with their Uncle Newt. And Uncle Newt is kind of a mad scientist. If you've ever seen a movie where the scientists are all wearing lab coats and have white hair that's sticking up in all directions and run out in the middle of the night with their amazing new scientific ideas, but might blow up at the house once or twice accidentally while they're doing experiments. That's the kind of uncle that Uncle Newt is. And so the kids have been sent to live with him when their parents have to leave very suddenly on a business trip. And they're enjoying living with him. They really like building things with him. And they like going to visit the local spare parts store, the kind of junk store where they get all of the things to make their cool scientific creations. But the town that they live in is being robbed all of a sudden. There's different shops all around keep reporting that something's gone missing, and they can't find any evidence of who did it. But when Nick and Tesla walk around afterwards, they keep seeing these small robots around the town in places that they wouldn't have expected. And so they decide to solve the mystery. So they are investigating, they're trying to figure out who did it, and they're also challenging each other to build robots on the side. The cool thing about this book and the whole Nick and Tesla series is that it has instructions for everything that Nick and Tesla do in the book. So it will tell you how to build a do-it-yourself semi-invisible BattleBot. And it has all of the things that you'll need and all of the instructions. A lot of them are probably things that you have lying around the house. Some of them are probably things that you would have to buy specially or special order if you wanted to make these. But none of them are things that are too terribly expensive. We're not talking hundreds of dollars to build these robots. We're talking a few recycled parts and maybe a $10 pack of batteries or wires. So if you're interested in learning to build your own robots from parts, this is a great book with a lot of different activities that you can use to practice building. And if you like this book, there are others in the series that aren't about robots, but are about other kinds of scientific and other kinds of robotics and engineering projects that you can do yourself at home. So again, this is Nick and Tesla's Robot Army Rampage by Science Bob Pflugfelder and Steve Hockensmith. So all three of the books that I talked about today are ones that you can put on hold through the Allegheny County Library Association's online catalog and send them for pickup at your local library. So contact your local library if you are curious how how open they are right now, and whether you need to make an appointment for curbside pickup, whether you can go in and browse, or whether they have other accommodations that they suggest. But I thought while we were talking about robots, I would teach you how to tell a story and draw a picture about robots. So if you have any younger siblings at home, or if you like talking to younger kids, or even if you just want to draw a robot and you've never really quite known how, this is a neat story that also tells you how to draw the robot at the same time. So I'm going to tell you a story about two siblings, and those two siblings can be named whatever you want. You can name them Nick and Tesla, like in this last book. You can name them Dot and Doris. You can name them Jose and Maria. You can name them Snickerdoodle and Sugar. Whatever you want to call them. So I'm going to tell you about two siblings, and their names will go with Sugar and Snickerdoodle. So Sugar and Snickerdoodle lived with their parents, and their parents knew that Sugar and Snickerdoodle loved to make things. They just loved to work on projects, and they were makers, right? They liked to tinker and play around. So because of that, their parents let them have a workstation in the basement. So we need to draw the basement. That's going to be all the way down at the bottom, right, where the basement is. And so there was a table for Sugar, and there was a table for Snickerdoodle, and then there was a bench along the side where they could work on projects together. And the things you should know about Sugar and Snickerdoodle. So Sugar liked to build with boxes. He loved little boxes, he loved big boxes, and he loved medium-sized boxes. Just all kinds of boxes, just building with all of them. And Snickerdoodle liked to build with wires. He liked building with little wires. He liked building with big wires. And he liked building with medium-sized curly wires. Lots and lots of building and wires. So one day they worked on a project, and it wasn't even just one day. They worked on it all week. They were working and working and working and working, and it just felt like it wasn't quite right. It wasn't quite coming together. And so they stopped and they looked at it and they thought, this needs just a little bit more. And so Snickerdoodle said, I think it needs some curly wires. How about a medium one and a long one? And Sugar looked at it and said, that's great. I really think it needs just a couple more boxes. And so Sugar added a couple more boxes, and they stepped back and they looked at it and they said, that's it. We did it. We're done. And do you know what they built? I'll bet you do. But if you don't, try flipping it over. Do you recognize it now? It's a robot. So you can use a story like that. Remember how the tables were the eyes? You can use a story like that to draw a robot, or you can use a story like that to entertain a friend or a younger sibling or a cousin or anybody else that you know, or a parent, honestly. Adults like stories too. And practice drawing. So I hope that you enjoyed those activities and the books that we talked about today. I will see you back here next week, next Thursday, for another middle grade moment where we're going to talk about 3 more books that are great for 9 to 12-year-old readers. Until then, I hope you have a wonderful week. Bye!